Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Nurse, and I'm here today to provide an update on marine mammal entanglements that have been reported in Norfolk. So this is an update from the presentation that I gave at the MCNAG conference last summer. So some of the data is different. So a bit about myself. I'm one of the members of the Marine Conservation for Norfolk Action Group, also known as MCNAG. I'm also a marine mammal medic with the British Divers Marine Life Rescue and a keen scuba diver. So as a bit of a background information on the data, so we finalised our report in March 2023, and that was created in collaboration with RSPCA East Winch Wildlife Centre, the British Divers Marine Life Rescue, Friend of Horsey Seals, and the Marine and Wildlife Rescue. And we issued that to Eastern IFCA, who are the local fisheries department. The idea of the report was to create one source of data which showed the impact of fishing activities on the local marine mammal wildlife. And we hope that we could continue to keep that record up to date so that we can monitor any changes and then hopefully work with IFCA to look at ways of improving and reducing the impact of fishing on the local wildlife. So since we've actually started to collect this data, we've now managed to bring Holcombe Estate and National Trust into this process. And then going forward, they're going to be providing us data on any incidents that happen on their land. So looking at the data, 2023, we saw 21 marine mammal entanglements in Norfolk, and that was the worst we've seen to date. The actual data, worryingly, there seems to be a sharp increase in entanglements taking place since 2017, well, at least reported entanglements. We had a bit of a dip in 2020, but we believe that's due to the effects of lockdown and members of the public not being out and about and reporting entanglements. But yeah, we can definitely see there is a increase in the incidents taking place, and then obviously, up to date, since 2012, we've actually seen now a total of 98 marine mammal entanglements in Norfolk. When we've looked into the further data that's available elsewhere across the country, we've seen that the IFCA district, so sort of Lincolnshire, Norfolk and Suffolk, this area is actually the third highest in the country in terms of entanglements. And yeah, IFCA accounted for 14% of all national seal entanglements reported to the British Divers and Marine Life Rescue in 2023. What we've also seen is actually the widespread effect of entanglements. So it's not just localised to a few little areas across Norfolk. These reports have come in from Snepshon in the western Norfolk all the way around to the Great Yarmouth area in the east. Horsey and sort of Winsterton area, that has seen 50% of all entanglement reports since 2012. So when we actually look at what happened to these entanglements, the one positive note to take place is that out of the 98 instances, only 6 seals have died as a result of entanglement. And this is mainly down really to the fantastic effort of the staff at RSPCA East Winch, and then the rescue agencies of Marine and Wildlife Rescue, Friend of Horsey Seals, and British Divers Marine Life Rescue. As we can see, the number of seals that have been sent to rehabilitation and then released is incredible. It's at 58. So we have a huge success rate thanks to those organisations. In 2023, 7 seals were freed on the beach and 12 required rehabilitation, of which 11 have now been released back into the wild. The last death that occurred was actually in February 2022, so we have now gone a fair while without seeing a death, which is good news, and we hope that we don't see any more deaths in the future. So what we've actually seen from the data as well is that the grey seal is typically the one that is actually affected in Norfolk. So as it says here, 97% of instances since 2012 have involved the grey seal. Now that is worrying. The UK has approximately 40% of the world's grey seal population, and Norfolk itself has some of the UK's largest grey seal breeding colonies, and actually some of the most successful ones. So we look at the 2022-2023 winter breeding season. We saw an additional 1,000 births take place at both Blakeney Point and Horsey when you compare it to the 2021-2022 winter breeding season. So we can see that actually Norfolk is vital for the grey seal population, and it is just, yeah, it is worrying that we've seen so many of these individual species sort of affected. The common seal, we've not seen any reports since 2015 of common seal entanglements, which is good for the common seals, but yeah, not brilliant for the grey seals. So looking at the causes of entanglement, 2023 again saw an increase in entanglements caused by fishing gear compared to 2022. So 90% of all entanglements in 2023 were caused by fishing-related materials. And what is worrying is that the monofilament netting, we saw a huge increase in incidences caused by that type of netting in 2023. And actually monofilament netting is the one that causes the most damage because it digs so far and cuts really deep into the marine mammals. We've got a photo on the next slide that sort of shows that level of injury, and it's quite horrific, really. Overall, since 2012, and since we've been collecting, or the data's been collected from, 86% of entanglements have been caused by fishing gear. So the fishing industry is a clear issue for marine mammals. When we look at other non-fishing related materials, it's the flying rings, which have actually we are in the process of sail bans in Norfolk, which is a great campaign. But we're just not seeing the change in the fishing industry. They're not changing their gear, they're not changing their practices, but they are the biggest issue for all marine mammals. So we've also looked at the cost of entanglement. So obviously the cost to the actual species themselves, the individuals, as far as any research has gone, you know, the seals that are rehabilitated and released, they live a happy life. There are obviously scars from their injuries, but there's no change in their circumstances in terms of how they get on when they're back in the wild. So you can obviously see this is one of the photos of an injury from monofilament netting. So it digs so deep into the skin, but actually it can be treated and it does heal given time. So we looked at the actual cost to RSPCA East Winch, and we estimate that since 2012, the cost of them is in excess of £900,000. That's just for entanglement rehabilitation alone, let alone all the other work they do with other wildlife. So adult seals actually cost a considerable amount more when you compare them to seal pups or juveniles, just because their needs are more. They need more water changes. There's the extra medication that they need. And obviously the cost of food as well. The cost of fish for these seals is incredible. So an adult seal could cost in the region of £15,000 to rehabilitate. And actually in 2023, the centre saw its largest ever intake of adult seals requiring rehabilitation due to entanglement. And there were some really nasty entanglements last year. So when we actually then look as well at the resources, so the resources have been stretched. So the salt use alone by July 2023 had matched what they used in the whole of 2022, and that's just because they're using the larger, you know, they're trying to treat larger adult seals, so they need more water changes, which involves the salt. So yeah, so to the actual cost to the RSPCA is enormous. Throughout the whole process of this data gathering, we've always said that there is a lack of data when it comes to bycatch that happens in Norfolk. We've not seen any data when it comes to entanglements of porpoise, dolphin, or whales in Norfolk, and we know there are these species. There's loads of different deep species of dolphins and whales that visit Norfolk. And we know that bycatch does take place. I mean, there are unofficial reports that we can look at, but we've not included that in our data because they're so few and far between. But what we need to look at is actually when you compare the fishing practices in Norfolk and you compare them to elsewhere, you can see there is similarities in fishing practices, and you can only really assume that there are going to be some similarities in terms of entanglements. So the Scottish Entanglement Alliance, they carried out some research and they actually estimated that minke and humpback entanglements in Scotland was closer to 360 rather than the 60 that were reported. So we can look at that in Norfolk and we can say, yes, we haven't got that data and we haven't got it officially, but we can tell that the entanglement and the bycatch most likely takes place. It's just not reported. So what's our hopes for 2024? Well, what we're hoping is that we can have better record keeping by local councils. So now that we've got National Trust and Holcombe Estate on board, we're now looking at Kings Lynn Borough Council and the North Norfolk District Council to sort of see how we can work with them to keep records. They deal with seals that wash up, but they don't necessarily go into the finer detail of looking at for signs of entanglement. They typically just deal and sort of discard with the seals. And what we're asking them now is actually, you know, let's try and keep those records to include that data in. We're not expecting a drop in reported incidences, and we actually anticipate the increase will continue, unfortunately. But we're now having these conversations with the with IFCA and hopefully the local fisheries to see where we can make improvements in our fishing practices to reduce the amount of ghost gear that's out in the sea of Norfolk, to then hopefully reduce the number of entanglement incidences. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that was informative.